Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. Let's talk boxing. A monster heavyweight fight that I'm really looking forward to is coming up. It's the rematch between Big Bang Zhang and the juggernaut Joyce. It's a technical breakdown and prediction video coming up. How good was that impression of Zhang, by the way? Have you ever heard him talk? Zhang. I'm telling you, if I was hanging around with this dude for 3 weeks, I'd be talking fluent Mandarin. But that's neither here nor there because this fight is a vital one. It's essentially a World Cup semi-final in some regards, because the winner of this fight will go on to fight for a heavyweight title. In the first fight, I predicted it would either be Zhang early or Joyce late. And I got a little bit greedy with the sort of round picking that I was doing. And I was saying Zhang in the first four or Joyce in the last four. And I left the middle round sort of unattended. But if I was to just sort of be less greedy and say, well, it will either be Zhang in the first half of the fight or Joyce in the second half of the fight, we would have got that prediction correct. Because Zhang inflicted enough damage to have Joyce pulled out in the sixth round after some serious eye damage. But you'd seen that Joyce had started to build up somewhat of a head of steam. He started to find his feet in there, but the damage he'd accrued was simply too much. So what I want to do is get into how that played out, what areas these guys need to be capitalizing on if they're to come out victorious, and then we'll come up with a prediction at the end of the video. In the build up to the first fight, we spoke about how Zhang has a tendency to engage the lead hand of the opponent just by patting it down, and that this could be a serious weapon against Joyce, because we know Joyce relies a lot on that thudding, consistent, heavy jab, and he's got great volume with it as well, and he doesn't have to load up on it for it to be destructive, and he can turn it into a hook and all sorts. So it's a very devastating lead hand from Joyce, but because his backhand, his right hand, is very, very slow, often you'll see him miss wildly, even against the likes of Daniel Dubois, for instance, who many people consider to be quite robotic. That right hand of Joyce at times looked wayward. But this was only an initial tactic from Zhang, because he seemed to get quite comfortable with the distance in there, and he started to give Joyce different looks. He started to give him upper body movement. He started to hide behind the shoulder, flick up the elbow to deflect the jab. It was almost as though he was baiting Joyce in. He was setting traps. And it seemed to work, because you saw that Joyce began to overreach with that right hand. He started to get desperate. He couldn't find a home for the jab, and he started to really lean that weight over that front foot with that right hand. And that's giving you a pattern to potentially counter, because if you're able to step away from it the way Zhang did, by the time Joyce resets by reshifting his weight back to a level balanced equilibrium, he's there to be hit. And indeed, Zhang was able to counter that overreach quite consistently. So one of the things Joyce needs to be very, very wary of is getting so frustrated that he looks for big power shots early on, where he's really launching his way into the shot. And as a result of this, you started to see that Joe started to walk into that backhand consistently, even when he wasn't overreaching. As you can see, another big weapon that he's got, again, something we spoke about in the preview to the first fight, is that right hook, that lead right hook that he throws over the lead hand of the opponent, Zhang. And so that made Joyce tentative, perhaps, from stepping on the outside. That meant that Joyce was coming in through a very central position, and you're walking straight into that backhand. But I want you to see here as well, one of the basic rules that people talk about is when you have an orthodox versus southpaw, you want to get your foot on the outside of the lead foot of the opponent. And we've spoken on many occasions in the past about how that rule can be bent and broken to your advantage a variety of ways. A lot of people just throw it out there because it's something they've heard without really understanding it. There is a basis to that rule, though. It's the safest thing to do. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing you should do. If you are going to bend the rule and break the rule, you have to do it at the right time. And Joyce was not. So I just want to give you this example here. Look at the positioning of their feet. As Zhang goes to step in, their feet are almost in line with each other. When I'm going to press play, I want you to take a little look at the feet of Joyce. He instantly steps inside the foot of Zhang there. Now, why did he step on the inside of it in this position? I want you to look at the jab hand. He's looking to line up that lead hand to throw a jab there. So he's lined up his shoulder with the face of Zhang. That's fine, that's great. Something that Alexander Usyk does. But if you're going to do that, you also have to change the level. Because if you're coming into the line of that counter backhand, you don't want to be in a position where you're gambling, exchanging your jab for his backhand. If you both land, you're going to come off worse. And if he lands before you, well, then you potentially risk getting knocked out. So it's a very high risk maneuver for minimal gain from Joyce, and he does this quite consistently. It's a real risky move to do, and one that I would not advise for him to continue to try and do. Now, in terms of the keys to success for Joyce, there are various areas he needs to consider. Distance, positioning, and decision making when it comes to shot selection and how to manipulate the opponent. You want to involve bodily control here. You want to affect the construct of Zhilei Zhang, because ultimately he's looking to set up traps for that big backhand and also to land a big right hook if he can lure you onto it. So you want to take away his ability to set up, and we know that he has got stamina issues. I know a lot of people question this and they say, well, what about the Hrgovic fight? Listen, he was landing some big individual pot shots against Hrgovic throughout the course of the fight, but he was not active throughout the course of the fight. He is a guy that has to control tempo. So in those moments where he wants to take breaks, you have to stop him from taking breaks without getting yourself into a position to be countered. Now that means you have to work from range with your long shots and throw them quickly one after the other. You're not loading up so that he can punch in between them. They're fast combinations if you're Joyce, and remember, he hasn't got the fastest hands. So when I say fast combinations, you're ultimately talking about shots that almost look like shoe shine stuff. But because he's naturally heavy-handed, they have an impact. We'll get to that in a moment. The other thing you want to do is continue to move to your left, away from that big backhand. Now, as we've said, there is that danger of the lead right hook from Zhilei Zhang. But when you are engaging him, particularly with your own lead hand, if you're landing left jabs and left hooks around the guard, and you quickly mix it up with a follow-up hook as well, perhaps a double hook, head-body or body-head, it does seem to engage him slightly. He doesn't often punch with you in those moments. So it can give you opportunities to move around him and then collapse the pocket whilst you're moving to your own left. And when you do collapse the pocket, you want to stay as close as possible. He wants a bit of rotation to let go of that backhand. He rotates into it. So the closer you are to him, if you're right on his chest, you're in somewhat of a safe place. This is a way that you can potentially start to wear him down. Let's look at some of the areas that I'm talking about here. You see how he took through that jab, took half a step back. There are the double hooks around the guard, and a quick left hook followed by a right hand there. And if you notice the right hand there, he isn't leaning into it. He isn't trying to throw it as hard as he can. Look at this one here. He's just placing it. Now, Joyce wants to throw a big right hand like he was doing earlier, but that is what will lead him to get countered. You don't want to do that until Zhang really starts to slow down, and in the latter half of the fight, you can really start to commit to your shots. Initially, what you want to be doing is these short shots that are landing, and you're maintaining range, you're landing around the hook, and you're making him come towards you, and you just being very comfortable with your distance control. Now, I want to show you a couple of slow-mo clips here, just to show you a couple of things that I'm talking about that Joyce can potentially do here. You can just see that he seems to almost be leaning forward, but his feet are quite narrow. He's actually prepared to move. He's setting a trap here for Zhilei Zhang. And what happens is Zhang decides that he's going to step in to reach with that backhand. And you could just see Joyce takes half a step back, and he's got his foot slightly on the outside of Zhang's. So as Zhang takes the bait and seeks to shoot that left hand down the pipe, you can see Joyce has got the superior foot positioning, and he's been prepared for this. So in that position, he's able to throw a very short right hand. Did you see that? There wasn't much load on it. Take a little look at that again. As Zhang commits to throwing the backhand, you can see there isn't much of a load there for Joyce. He's literally just timing him with a short right hand, and he just slips his head on the inside of that shot. And from there, it's Zhang who's now in a precarious situation, and then he's able to throw that left hook, which is partially caught by Zhang. But ultimately, it was Joyce that set the trap there because he wasn't overcommitting with his own shots, and he was cautious with his feet in terms of the distance. He wasn't falling into shots and falling into traps. Now, as we roll this on, I'll show you a second slow-mo clip. You see Joyce there throwing a jab. Again, his feet are quite narrow, and this time when he does take the step, he takes the step on the outside of Zhang's lead foot, something that hadn't been occurring much in this course of the fight. For the majority of the fight, it was Zhang that was having that positional advantage. And from this area, if you do then commit with that right hand fully and you dip forward, because you're dipping on the outside of that right shoulder of Zhilei Zhang, you're coming away from the potential of the backhand. So in these sorts of areas, when you're closer, when you're at mid-range and you've taken the outside step, Then in that position, Joyce can load up more with the right hand and throw a big right hand, and he comes over the top of the attempted backhand of Zhang. And here you can see with that left hook he uses it, he keeps it planted in there and he uses it for body control. And if you just quickly go back to that, you can see it's Zhang that actually pushes him away because he doesn't want him that close. So these are the areas that Joyce wants to be in, either right up close or at range, moving towards your own left, away from the backhand of Zhilei Zhang. Keep jabbing at that lead hand and hooking around it so that you can keep it engaged to prevent the potential of a right hook coming in. And that way you're not going to be as concerned about exiting that way, and you won't have to come in through that center line and start to get caught with those big shots. Having said that, if you are going to keep that higher guard, you are going to leave a gap in another area, and that is going to be down towards the body. And you saw that when Zhang was shooting a backhand to the body sporadically against Joyce, it was clearly having an effect. This is an area where Joyce, we've seen him affected in the past to the body, and when a guy hits as hard as Zhang, if it's unexpected and he's landing these sorts of shots, it could certainly take its toll. Now, another thing that Zhilei Zhang has to consider is that even when Joyce does some really good work, he often litters his work with some technical errors, so to speak, and Zhang's going to have to seek to capitalize on those. One of those errors is that he enters the pocket through the front door, as Teddy Atlas would like to say. In other words, he doesn't always disguise his entry point. He's not always working his way in intelligently. He's literally leaping in down the middle, directly in line with that backhand of Zhang. Additionally to that, when he does really good work, for example, engaging that lead hand of Zhilei Zhang, throwing hooks around that lead hand, and then moving to his own left to step around him, ripping the body before coming with that left hook, and putting his shots together well, at the end of that work, he will step out in a straight line, in line with that backhand again. And Zhang's going to want to capitalize either by timing him on his entry or following him on the way out. Let's take a look at some examples here of where he's doing good work, but also there's those errors. Look at the way he enters the pocket here. He literally just walks straight in after Zhang puts up a high guard. Now, if Zhang had put up a high guard here as a trap, Joyce has just walked straight into that. He's just come straight in. Now he's engaged that lead hand, like we said, hooked around it, thrown a nice little uppercut to the body, steps out, turns in, but then look how he steps out from this position. Look at that cocked backhand from Zhang. Is Joyce going to continue to move to his own left to exit? Is he going to stay tight on to have a little bump, a little push to stop Zhang being able to get off? No, he just takes straight steps backwards. Now, Zhang didn't capitalize, but he was able to. Here's another example here. Nice little left hook around the guard to engage that lead hand of Zhang's. Then comes the uppercut into the body from Joyce. Pushes him off. That's nice because he's affected his construct. That's what we said he should have done in the previous clip if you're going to step out. But look at the straight line that he's stepping out in. Again, he's not stepping out diagonally towards his own left shoulder. He's stepping out in a straight line. If Zhang was in a position here to take one step forward with that right foot just to close the range and throw a backhand down the pipe, he's going to land directly on Joyce's chin. Joyce then comes back in again with a left hook, this time to the body, closes the range, very close up, nice little left hooks there around the guard. This is good work. So while he's doing some really good work and doing everything we've said he needs to be doing, you can also notice that he's making errors. And again, at the end of that work, you just saw how he just nonchalantly takes a half a step out in a straight line. This is dangerous stuff. Last clip here that we'll look at for this section, you see that he throws a jab there, Joyce. He's waiting for Zhang to throw the backhand. He does. And he slips out on the inside of that backhand. And his foot positioning is good. So he's trying to line up that right hook. He really should have gone to the body here because Zhang is obviously dipping. His head's covered behind his own shoulder. That right hand then lands to the shoulder. Not really a scoring shot, shoulder stroke back. But Joyce has lifted that back foot off the floor. He's given so much into that shot. He's committed so much with that weight coming forward off of that back leg that he's now in a position to get caught with a little uppercut on his exit. And again, Zhang's flat-footed. If he wasn't though, and he was to follow up with another backhand, Joyce is in no man's land by the time he recovers his balance here. So There are a lot of errors that Joyce makes that Zhang's going to look to capitalize on. But there's no doubt that Joyce, if he gets his tactics right, can start to wear Zhang down in the second half of the fight. And there were signs of that happening in the first fight, but he took so much damage that he was simply unable to continue, according to the referee, and it was the right decision. So how do I think this fight will go? You know, when I said my prediction in the first fight was Zhang early or Joyce late, and I felt that Joyce late was the most likely outcome, but you had to really consider Zhang to be a significant threat. Most people were talking as though he's got a puncher's chance early on. And I was saying, no, he's a very real and credible threat. Stylistically speaking, he's a major problem for Joyce. I'm very excited for the fight. I've still got the tweets up on Twitter where you can see me banging the drum for this in the build up to the fight. So as a result of that, because I wasn't stunned, I wasn't shocked at the outcome, it doesn't really switch my viewpoint of the way the fight could play out or the strengths and limitations of the fighters. Whereas a lot of people that felt that Zhang had no chance either feel as though they underestimated Zhang or perhaps they overestimated Joyce. Because I haven't moved massively on my position, I still think Zhang early is a very real possibility, but I also think that Joyce late is a very real possibility too. Where I have shifted slightly is that Zhang's proven to have a fantastic chin, and he took big shots against Hrgovic, he took big shots against Joyce, and he was affected by a couple, but by and large they seem to bounce off him. So my revised position compared to the first one is that it will either be Zhang in the first 6 rounds, Zhang early, or Joyce will probably win the fight on points. I think he'll start to build up a head of steam from the middle rounds onwards. I wouldn't be stunned if he wears him down, but I think Zhang is the sort of guy who is very durable, and I think we've seen that enough now for me to change my mind on that. Having said that, let me just say this. Joyce is a guy who puts together a lot of shots with a lot of volume, and fighters tend to crumble underneath that incessant pressure. The thing is with Zhang, he's a lot more economical with his volume, but his shots are massive. I know he's old and his feet aren't amazingly fast, but he's got really good upper body movement and really fast hands. And they're powerful, they're heavy. And so what can often happen is that you'll see guys that will be outworking him. Let's go back to the Hrgovic fight, for instance, where I thought that Hrgovic won the fight, but a lot of people do not. And one of the reasons that a lot of people felt he lost that fight is because whilst Hrgovic might be outlanding him, Zhang will go and land 1 or 2 big shots and the crowd will go, oh! And they place an awful lot of emphasis on those shots. Now, I'm the sort of guy, when it comes to power, I tend, unless you're really snapping someone's head all over the place or they've wobbled or they're hurt, I tend to go for volume. Because otherwise, I'm interpreting the effect that shot is having. Do you understand? In other words, unless Zhang visibly hurts Hrgovic or visibly hurts Joyce, just because he's landed 2 or 3 shots that the crowd go all over, unless there's a real effect, I'm going to go with the guy who's landing consistently with clean and effective punches throughout the course of the round. But because the crowd are not like that, and if you go and look at the first fight, even in round 5, say, where Joyce had a really good round, when Zhang is landing sporadically, the crowd are saying ooh and ah. That sort of thing can affect the judges. And there's no right and wrong. This is where boxing is open to interpretation. These are the grey areas where it comes to how people score fights. The reason that I often hold it against the way people score fights, because you've got to be consistent in your methodology. And a lot of people are not, right? Sometimes they'll score quality of shot. Other time they'll go with volume. They do whatever suits them. I'm quite consistent. But the point I'm making here is that there's a real possibility that Joyce outworks Zhang. You feel that he's won the fight on points, and the guy next to you is going to be saying, nah, man, it was Zhang that won the fight on points because he was the one banging Joyce's head all over the gaff. In which case, many might say there are more methods in which Zhang can win this fight. So, to get off the fence, I'm predicting Joyce wins the fight on points, but if you're talking about a race of potentials, a very close second is that Zhang gets it done again in the first 6 rounds. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Will Zhang capitalize on the errors of Joyce, or will the juggernaut re-emerge to grind down the big bang and claim his spot for a heavyweight title shot? Don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.